Culture Pop Remix.
Hello and welcome to Culture Pop Remix number 18. I'm your host, Oren Merton, and this is the Avengers Infinity War panel discussion. I am joined by previous cohorts Caren Spitler and Golden, and we discussed the movie for a little under an hour. This is a little bit longer than some of our previous panel discussions, but the movie has a lot more to it. So it goes without saying that this panel discussion is chock full of spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, I recommend you see the movie first and then listen to this podcast. We dive pretty deep into the film, and I hope you enjoy what we talk about. And without further ado, one more spoiler warning just for good measure, and here we go. Here we are at the Infinity War podcast panel. So we are here with Golden and Caren Spitler. Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
So let's jump right into it. First, I wanted to ask, what did everybody think of the story? We all kind of were excited about the idea of all of these Marvel superheroes being in the same film. So that's exciting. But then the real question is, did the story hold up to the weight of all that superpower?
I think it did because they were able to segment it off and have a little bit here and a little bit there and keep revolving back and building it up. Even when it got to the end, when there was going to be this, mass of these characters coming together, it had built it up enough to support that.
Caren?
Yeah, I kind of went in, luckily I had no spoilers. I knew nothing except for the commercial. And I kind of went in going, well, if they're bringing all of these people together, it's got to be some huge, huge thing. And once the storyline was revealed, with Thanos and all that, I felt that it was a fitting story arc to support getting all these different people involved together. So I really liked that, and I liked that they brought that particular character forward to kind of move the storyline.
I agree. I think that when you have this kind of team film, if you don't have a powerful enough villain, say you're using, a D-list villain like Steppenwolf that no one has heard of in the DC universe, your movie kind of suffers from not having a villain that's up to snuff. That was one of the major criticisms of Justice League, that who is Steppenwolf? Why, Superman takes him out with a couple punches. Why do they need the whole Justice League for him?
And then you also have that he's a villain that does stuff. It's
right.
Not just, I'm going to put you, look, I've captured you. I'm going to leave you in this room that you will not be able to escape from and see that you escape later. No, it's just, if he's going to do it, he's going to do it, and it's done.
Right. Thanos is a great villain, and I think it goes to the writing and it goes to how good the story was, that because this movie was made with 10 years of Marvel movies behind it, they were able to give a ton of screen time to make the villain a three-dimensional character. They were able to focus on Thanos, whereas in the Justice League movie or in a lot of these other movies, the Justice League movie had to introduce Flash and Cyborg and all these other characters, so it was kind of tied up introducing all the heroes. But this movie assumed that after 10 years of billion-dollar movies, you probably knew who everybody was. They weren't going to tell you who Captain America was. If you didn't know, watch the other three films. And they just gave a lot of time to making Thanos a really meaty villain, a really deep villain who had a point of view. He had something to say. And I think the movie it elevated the entire movie by making Thanos a worthy adversary.
You actually got to spend time getting to know him.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, here's the big bad villain. Okay, now the heroes are going to go up against it. And I think even if someone hasn't seen all of the movies leading up to it, they're still going to be able to follow the story because there's enough hints about who these people are when Captain America and Tony Stark are having their little, we're not really talking to each other. you don't have to actually know that they're not talking to each other to get that tension that exists between those characters.
Talking about Thanos, this leads me very easily into the next topic I wanted to talk about was, what did you think of his motivation? What did you think of his sort of the reason that he was destroying half the universe?
You know, we think about what we're going through here on Earth and the fact that we're using our resources, and he's kind of out there saying that, all planets in the universe are suffering these same things, and that he proposed this and they thought he was a madman, which is funny because he obviously is a madman, and so he's offering this, yet his vanity and his wanting to be a supreme being doesn't offer the solution of him being taken out. It just offers, okay, I'm going to cleanse half the universe and we'll all be good and I'll be there. And maybe whoever I love. But yeah, looking at what's going on here on Earth, and people, it's been thought of before, obviously, by other people, that maybe we should reduce the population.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't genocide. It was just, this is going to be random. I mean, the only person that, for sure, besides Thanos, that was going to survive was Tony Stark, because that's the one that he promised. It doesn't matter how powerful you were, who you knew, how much money, if you were poor, if you lived on the streets, if you lived on the clouds.
Yeah, it was an equal opportunity mass murderer.
Yes. And in some ways, you have to, as much as, you want to hate the villain, I think in some ways you have to admire that he's doing this because he sees that this is the only way that half of the people are going to be able to survive, because the population of the universe is expanding beyond what it's capable of sustaining.
He definitely is someone who's trying to at least portray that in his sort of single-minded murderousness, he is being fair, that he's being equal about it. My thought when I first heard that is, of course, like you said, Caren, we've heard this before. This is a story we've heard before. There is a certain sense that we can identify with it, but I think the reason we can identify with it is because we live on one planet, we can't get off of it, and the resources here are finite. The thing that I kept thinking is, there's not just the infinite universe with trillions of planets. There's the multiverse. You've got people going through the mystic things to get to other dimensions. You've got literally infinity. And the idea that infinity is being depleted to nothing, it didn't quite ring to me. It's like, really? You can't find in another dimension an empty planet somewhere? You can't create the equivalent of the Genesis torpedo in Star Trek, or use your magic to terraform a dead hulk of a world and put people there? I mean, there's so many ways when you have technology and magic and other universes that you could take empty space, take dead planets, and create room and resources. It seemed like, well, that's kind of that's kind of not looking at the full solution. That's saying, well, hey, I've got a way to do it. Let's just kill half of everybody. Okay, I'm going to do that.
One of the last series of books that Terry Pratchett did, I think it was with Stephen Baxter, I'd have to double check, was a series that they realized they could step into another dimension of Earth.
Yeah.
And it was like, how many steps away did you go? And they would have all of these different steps away. So yeah, I can see what you're saying with, well, why not just go to a different dimension?
Right.
But is that really solving the problem then?
Yeah, if nothing else, it's just moving it along. But even killing half the people isn't any better of a solution as far as like a permanent solution, because you'll get more people. They'll keep growing. They'll keep expanding. And eventually that half will turn back into the whole. And so it keeps going and going and going. One of the things from a comic book perspective that I thought was interesting is that this series of 2 movies is very, very loosely based on a Marvel event miniseries called Infinity Gauntlet. Whereas, the movie's Infinity War, the comic series Infinity Gauntlet. So in the comic series, it's completely different motivation. and it's much more comic booky, and it's much more evil, but it does sort of sidestep you second guessing it. In the motivation in the comics is Thanos falls in love with Lady Death. So he falls in love with the personification of death and murder. And in order to prove his love, Thanos decides, I will show Lady Death how much I love her by killing half of everyone alive. Isn't that a wonderful way to show Lady Death that I'm her guy? And on the one hand, that's pretty comic book and absurd. But on the other hand, I mean, you can't say, you can't scientifically punch holes in it because it's not based on science. It's based on one guy's emotion. It was just an interesting comparison.
So I have a question going back to the Gauntlet for a minute, because I remember like looking at an article, things you might have missed in the movies. If they made the Gauntlet for him, how was it in Odin's trophy room?
Well, if you recall
did it get taken away from him at some point? I'm just not as well versed in that history, so...
Well, if you recall, there was...
Apparently I don't recall, which is why I'm posing the question.
Yeah, there was a completely flippant aside in Thor Ragnarok where Hela, Kate Winslet, is walking through the treasure room. Kate Blanchett is walking through the treasure room on her way to the, break the floor where she can raise the dead with Scourge, Keith Urban.
Okay.
And Carl Urban. I keep naming everybody wrong. But there's a point where she looks...
It's okay. You can edit it out later.
Yeah, I won't edit it out. Let people know that I got these names wrong. So there's a point where she turns to the Infinity Gauntlet that's in there, looks to it, bats it aside, says, fake.
Oh, okay.
And keeps going. So that's how...
Why would they even have it? Yeah. How would they know what it even looks like to have it? Well, because it kind of seemed like it was just made.
Well, I'm sure they know what it looks like because they have a relationship with the dwarves, because the dwarves made...
What dwarves? I'm saying there really isn't any left.
But I guess there would have been at the time.
I got the impression from this movie that as soon as he had them make that...
He killed them all except
for... He killed them all.
Yeah,
so
I did too.
How is it that they got to know what this gauntlet looked like to even have the fake in the trophy room? Because it sure seemed like, Thanos went in, had them make it as soon as they were done making it. Yes, thank you for that, and...
Goodbye.
Goodbye, yes. Except for you. You're going to remember, but you just won't be able to do anything about it.
Yeah. And of course, then he turns around and does. So the moral of the story is, even if you think you've crippled a guy, you never know what he can do when he has, a god on his side. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Sounds like it could be a continuity error or something else going on there. Something that they let slip through the cracks. I'm sure someone will be able to explain or put, square the circle there. But I can't square the circle. But that also gets to the interaction of the characters and how the different Marvel heroes interacted, how they interacted with the villain, everything. What did you think of the character interaction in the movie? Because there were a lot of characters.
Oh, I thought the character interaction was incredible. I thought that the ways that the actors and actresses played off of each other's characters, how they interacted, the scene between the Chris's. I want to go watch Ghostbusters now because, I've heard that Chris Hemsworth has a lot of comic talent, and I think that came up in this, and now I'm like, I haven't watched that new Ghostbusters yet. Maybe it will be worth it. Maybe I should go watch it because this was pretty awesome.
I think it came up. I think Chris Hemsworth's comic talents came up in Thor Ragnarok as well. He's a funny guy.
Yes, it was just the two of them together, and Chris Hemsworth. I wonder how many takes it took for him not to bust up laughing, because that was, just the way he was being mocked. I mean, I'm sure that the outtakes or the behind the scenes for that probably would be hilarious. Just watching what happens as soon as they say cut.
I'm guessing with the when it goes to home video release, we will find out. Caren, what do you think of the way the characters interact with each other?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed several different interactions. But one thing that not necessarily an interaction part, but the different kinds of comedy that they brought, because you have, you have the whole thing with the one of the Chris's, the one from the Goofy movies with the tree.
Star-Lord.
With names.
Chris Pratt.
Star-Lord.
Chris Pratt's the actor.
The way
Peter
that
Quill.
Star-Lord's comedy comes across, and at one point, what does he call it? He says, "You're pithy. You need more than a pithy attitude or something to accomplish this." And Tony Stark. I liked it because Tony Stark's brand of humor is sarcasm, where Star-Lord can be also sarcastic, but in a much goofier kind of way.
Right.
It's a totally different kind of humor. And I liked bringing back to the interaction, I like when those two finally came together and spoke to each other, because they had a very different approach of how they looked at things, yet the dialogue between them was really funny.
I agree, and I think that goes. I think the writing was really top notch in this film, and I think that goes to speak to how well the writers did, and also how they knew when they should ask for help. One of the things that is I don't even think it's a secret. James Gunn has admitted it flat out. Is that James Gunn was brought in? He was listed as, I think, one of the executive producers. But he was specifically brought in to punch up the dialogue for the Guardians. So he helped write the characters that he's kind of helped create as well. And I think that speaks both to the openness of the writers to bring to other people coming in and bringing their talent in.
Considering you have a collapse of all of these different movies and characters into one, I think that the dialogue and the characters stayed true to who they were outside of this movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to the exchange between, Thor and Star-Lord. Thor was very much like, wait a minute, no, I just like most of it like went over his head as to what he was saying to him. And he just continued to keep on in the Thor attitude.
Right.
And what Thor would know, and this is how Thor would react. And that was very well written, because it could have been toned down, or it could have been like eased up, but he just like kept to it. Like he couldn't call it's like he kept saying the rodent, or what did he keep calling him? Rabbit. The rabbit.
Yeah, that was a really good point, Darcy. I think you nailed it there. And also with the exchange of them, Thor is very pragmatic and very, he has what he wants, and then he just is very clear about how he states things. So that interaction really played well. And I didn't know, Oren, what you just brought up about them bringing other people in to help write, which makes sense, because you really do want to have those characters remain true to themselves. And if I was the person who normally writes Thor, well, would I really know what Star-Lord would say in the way he would say it?
Right. Right.
So yeah, that really helped. One set of character interactions that I thought, or that I wish I could have seen more of, and hopefully we will in the upcoming film, is the characters in Wakanda, specifically the sister whose name I don't know, the scientist one.
Shuri.
Especially her, because obviously they took her to a point where her technology is better than Bannon's, and better than why am I forgetting his name when I just said it?
Better than Bruce Banner and
Thank you.
Stark?
Tony Stark.
And Tony Stark's. And I really apologize for this. Anyway,
Yes, and he's also worth more than Tony Stark. He's got more money.
Right. So I was really hoping to see a little bit more with that character and those interactions, and hopefully with the next film we will.
My guess is that if the brother is gone, then maybe she's going to step up into the role of Black Panther for the next movie.
Absolutely. In the comics, she has been Black Panther at various points. So certainly there's an opening. There's a suit without a wearer. So There's certainly a place for her to go with that. Yeah, it's interesting because I believe she is considered to be the most intelligent character in the Marvel Universe. So one little exchange I really liked was when she's talking to Bruce Banner with Vision on the table and says, well, why didn't you, connect the synapses this way? And he kind of looks at her and says, well, because we didn't think of that. And she gives him this, kind but still kind of patronizing smile and says, well, I'm sure you did the best you could. I just love that because she knows that she's as smart as they come. So I really enjoyed that little
But she
exchange there.
doesn't throw it in anyone's face.
Right.
She's very sincere about it, and she's like, oh yeah, no, I'm sure you did the best you could.
Right. So we touched on the ending when we talked about Black Panther being dusted. So what do we think of the ending?
I was devastated by it, mostly because, like I said, I didn't... of course, there's a sequel. They wanted to make more money. It's a good franchise. And I should have gone in with that mindset, and I didn't. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to wrap it up. And I thought at certain points that it could be wrapped up. So when I started to realize that, okay, this is it. They're dusting everybody, literally. I was a little bit heartbroken.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously what they were hoping for. They were hoping that people would be shocked and devastated that all these A-level, A-list heroes are vanishing from the universe.
I thought they wrapped it up. I mean, half the people died, and he's kicking back watching the sunrise or the sunset.
Right. Like he said he was going to, from his farm.
Did you stay for the end of the credits?
Yes, we did. We did.
One of the things I think in the movie that gave away that these deaths weren't permanent was you saw the moment where Doctor Strange was doing the flippity flip with his head, off in his meditation, and Tony Stark asks what's going on. He said, I saw 14 million and whatever,
permutations or whatever
of what could happen. And he's like, well, how many did we win? And he says 1. And then later, when Tony Stark looks like he's going to die, Doctor Strange...
Well, Tony expects him to go ahead and let him die because he already said, if it comes to you or the stone wins. Stone has priority with me.
Right. And that was before he saw the one in which we win. And then at the end, when Tony Stark's, why did you do that? He says, it's the only way. So that kind of insinuates that the one winning ending required Tony Stark to be alive, and that by Tony Stark being alive, we're still on the path to that one win in movie 2.
He has to be alive at least for the beginning of the movie.
Right.
For the next movie, right?
That's right. Yeah, there's all kinds of theories I've seen online. One of them is that, and this is especially for Gamora, that Gamora is actually not dead but alive in the Soul Stone. But there's a theory that maybe everyone, all half of the universe that were destroyed, are now part of the Soul Stone. And so, first of all, that allows an interesting kind of second adventure with half the heroes trying to get out of the Soul Stone that, we all saw dusted. But it also gives an out for where they are, that if you can get them out of the Soul Stone, they can all come back and be fine.
But what about Loki?
I don't know. He may be gone. But, is he really? Is he ever gone? Can the god of mischief ever be gone? But, it's. I guess what we should do is look at their contracts.
At the very beginning of the movie, I kind of had a little bit of a problem with his back and forth again. For some reason, that was like the only part of the movie
that didn't seem quite as Loki-ish.
Didn't seem quite as smooth or cohesive to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, we know that Loki goes back and forth, but the way in which he did it at the very beginning of the movie, I was kind of like, really? Come on, really?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think Loki was utilized quite as well as he could have been.
He really thinks he's going to be able to stab him?
Well, he is a god after all. Even I like you, Caren, I didn't read anything about the movie. I stayed off Twitter. I tried to avoid spoilers as much as I could. And I did. I really walked in knowing very little. However, I follow the industry very carefully. So I think the deaths had way less impact on me because I already knew that Chris Pratt and company are going to be filming Guardians of the Galaxy 3, that Black Panther 2 was greenlit and is being written.
Yes, but it could be that she's the Panther.
It could be, but the thing that I had read said, all these actors are returning. Right, he's returning for flashbacks. So, I'd already read all this business information that kind of, took away this. Plus, John Scalzi wrote a review of the movie where he was unsatisfied by the movie. He said it was a great achievement, but it did not satisfy me. And the reason specifically was that he found none of these deaths believable because he simply knows that Disney is not going to kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Yeah.
It made it unbelievable. And on the one hand, since I follow the business too, I understand where he's coming from. But at the same time, I'm able to put that aside when I'm watching the film. And especially Spider-Man. And so much credit has to go to Tom Holland as an actor. When he is like grabbing Tony Stark like a son grabbing a father saying, I don't want to die. I mean, it really choked me up because I was able to put all the business aside and just think about, here is a young man who's still in school, has a whole life ahead of him, has these wonderful powers, wants to do these great things, and yet he is, feeling himself literally vanishing before his own eyes. And he really sold that. It wasn't like, hey, what the hell? Whoosh. He was like, he felt, something happening and he knew what it was. And it was breaking his heart.
I think that they all did a really good job with that.
That was a good moment, too.
I agree, and I was able to kind of put the business aside. But as soon as that was when I was watching the movie. When the credits rolled, I was like, yeah, they're all coming back.
So I don't follow the industry really as much. I did know there was another Black Panther coming. But pragmatically, even though I was really devastated by the ending, for one, because they were dying, but two, because part of me just wanted to see Thanos ended in that movie. I kind of wanted that Hollywood ending for some reason. But I also knew that they're not going to kill off all of these huge franchise characters. And even though I wasn't concentrating on that in the moment, part of me was still like in the back of my mind, no, that isn't the end for them. I just didn't get my Hollywood ending. What I didn't see is I didn't get that foreshadowing that you got with Stark and that whole thing about, him needing to be alive
because
to carry
he
on
says
the next thing.
it was the only way.
Right. I didn't get that foreshadowing, but what I did get was the foreshadowing of the Time Stone, where the one character is killed and then he is immediately brought back so he can...
Yes.
Right.
Vision's brought right back because he now has the Time Stone. He can do that.
So that's another possibility of where they're taking the next one. Of course, it would assume that they get the gauntlet somehow.
And is the gauntlet still functional?
Right. And the thing is they may not even need to, because as the after credit scene showed, the character that they're bringing in the next one, that little little sending device, it links up to Captain Marvel, to Carol Danvers, and she is, Kevin Feige has already said that she is the most powerful character in the Marvel universe, and she's one of those characters who, in the comics, they kind of give her whatever power they need her to have for the story. So she may be able to power her own Wayback Machine without needing a gauntlet.
And it should be interesting since her movie comes out just a couple months before the next of the Infinity.
Right. Right. Her movie is a period piece. Her movie takes place in the 90s. So her movie is about how she becomes who she is.
But I wouldn't be surprised if her movie ends with her getting that signal.
Right. Or at the very least an after credit scene or something. Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing we have not touched on, kind of like it's been hidden from us or not wanting to come out. I had a little bit of a problem with, hey, look, Hulk, if you don't come out right now, you're going to die. And the Hulk's still not coming out. Is he really scared, or is there something else going on that is keeping him from emerging?
I have to admit, I agree. That's part of the story that I didn't really love, because I get what they were going for, that he got his ass handed to him by Thanos, so now he's moping and he doesn't want to just get the same ass kicking again. But at the same time, he is Banner. He knows if Banner dies, he's gone too. So you'd think at a certain point, just self-preservation would kick in.
And I guess Banner didn't really get hurt to the point like he was actually going to die. So maybe we didn't reach that level. But I did have a little bit, that just didn't seem to work for me in the movie. That was like one of the few things that kept, I don't know, it kept being like, oh, okay, well, now we're at the college level in terms of movies, or master's or doctorate level movies, and now we're going back to elementary school for just a little bit with this little
I can see that
Hulk thing.
I think they were, from a story point of view, it seems like they were trying to build up tension by having him not show up, because everybody knows, oh, he's so strong, let's keep him out of it. But it did seem an artificial way to keep him out of it. It didn't seem to flow quite as easily from the events and the story.
It was nice to see Dr. Banner or Bruce Banner being able to fight alongside the Avengers without having to be the Hulk.
Right.
But it was still, that's the only thing that was kind of like just not very... Right. I didn't feel like that fit into the story the way that it should have.
Yeah, one of the things I wonder, and again, we'll have to see if Avengers 4 is coming out in a year, if it will do this or not. I'm wondering if one of the things they're setting up is, in various comics, the Hulk ends up, for one reason or another, being pretty articulate. The Hulk ends up being basically Banner, big and green. So they already established in Ragnarok that he can speak, that it's not just and Hulk smash, but they gave him more vocabulary. So I'm wondering if part of this back and forth with Banner, like they're talking to each other, is ultimately when he does Hulk out, it will be both of them. So it'll be Hulk with the brain, communicating with Banner, and he's getting that intellect as well as just his anger.
So with half of the people disappearing, is it possible for the Hulk to disappear from Banner?
I would say no.
I know they're not going to go there. I'm just... Yeah.
I would say no, because I think, as a organism, they're the same, but...
Okay.
It'll be, that is a fun point. I wonder if they'll do that. I mean, I don't think they will, but... it'd be a fun point.
It's funny because, maybe that's just part of the further storyline that we'll get in the sequel. But it does seem, like Darcy was saying, that both that character and Loki were a little bit underwritten, or maybe stuff ended up on the cutting room floor with them.
Or it just wasn't or they thought, this is really well developed, we're going to do it like this, and it didn't work the way that they wanted it to.
Yeah.
Things that did work, though, I've told this to Oren, I told this to my aunt when I was talking to her. I said, I'm going to have to watch the movie again, though, because there were times that the entire audience was laughing so hard and so loudly that you couldn't hear the character speaking the next few lines.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you had that experience as well.
We did not. We saw it a whole week later, and actually the time that we went early, and there was hardly anyone in the theater. So
There you go.
Oh yeah, no, it
Get a
was
private show.
it was so loud. I'm like, okay, what is Drax saying? What is Drax saying? I can't read his lips.
Yeah.
Darn it.
I agree about the underwritten Loki and Thor, and one of the things I do wonder, or not Thor, Loki and Hulk. One of the things I do wonder, and Darcy, you brought this up to me, is that when you watched the trailers, you saw the Hulk running with the rest of the crew in Wakanda, and yet in the movie there was no Hulk. It was Bruce Banner in the Hulkbuster armor. So that could either mean two things. Either it was a purposeful deflection, that they just didn't want you to know that it was Bruce Banner in the Hulkbuster armor, and so they specifically made trailer footage just to fake you out, like they did with Hulk Ragnarok, where in all the trailers you saw Thor with two eyes and all the lightning, whereas in the movie one eye had already been poked out by that point. So it could have been they just didn't want you to know, that it was Bruce Banner in the Hulkbuster armor, because that might have given something away. Or another possibility is at some point in production, they thought that was going to be the Hulk. And then for whatever reason, they switched it up and decided, it's a little too straightforward with the Hulk. Maybe if we make it Banner, it'll make it more, it'll ratchet up the tension a little.
And speaking of things that do or do not disappear, so I talked to you about this before. So if Groot disappears at the end of the movie, you're saying that since Thor's new axe handle is made from Groot, since it is a cutting, it is still going to be there since it is now a new entity.
Right. That's what I would say. I don't think that Thor's axe hammer will lose its handle because Groot went away. You actually just brought up an interesting point. So we saw half the people disappear, both the heroes and the Wakandans, but also in the after credits scene, just, helicopters falling out of the sky, cars crashing without drivers. But if it's half the life, half the dogs would vanish, half the trees would vanish, half the carrots would vanish, half of all the plant life on other planets would vanish. It wouldn't just be sentient, people. It would be everything.
And then how is it that Titan is all of a sudden back to the way it was?
Right, green grass. Well, because if you recall with the Reality Stone, he could change reality to be whatever he wanted. He made people
So maybe what we're seeing from his perspective is his imagined reality of what Titan should look like and how he envisions it's going to be, since now half the people and half the creatures, or is it just half the people? Maybe it was half the sentient beings and not the animals.
Yeah, well,
that's what I assumed. I assumed it was just sentient beings, but for whatever reason, that was just a leap I took.
Well, I'm glad the dogs were spared, because why take it out on the dogs? All right, so before we wrap this up, any general comments that either of you have about sort of the technical elements of a movie like this, the effects, the production, music, just
I just have one other character. Nebula is badass. I mean, she is. I mean, she's there being tortured.
Yeah.
And even when she's still in the back of her mind looking for, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to get out of this? How am I going to get out of this?
Right.
And as soon as that opportunity appears, I'm out of here.
Karen Gillan is an actress I like a lot, but I think that there's a fine line that the character of Nebula has to walk, because she isn't as emotional because she's lost most of her being and she's a cyborg. But on the other hand, there is still that person underneath, and I think she does a great job of being both emotional and emotionless.
Yeah, I mean,
at the same
she
time.
knows her sister is gone. There's just this little bit of sadness, or that she knows she's gone, and she feels that, but she doesn't really leave any time to explore it because that's the rest of her character. The rest of her character, the cyber part of her character, is moving on. Technically, I thought all of the effects were awesome. I thought that the way that they just went ahead and started breaking it up and had the little segments and said, this is where we're at now, this is where we're at now, was very well done because they had this big cast of characters, and it was a way so that people didn't get lost in trying to keep everything straight. Oh, where are we now? Oh, that's okay. You know, they told us where we're at, so it kept all of that very clear. I thought that the image of Gamora just like walking next to Thanos and the little girl that they got to portray the young Gamora was just perfectly done. And that little tiny hand and that big giant one and just the emotion that was created there. You have these two characters that were put together, and even though she hates Thanos, it's still her dad. And even though she's working against him, you know that when they say you have to sacrifice someone and it has to be someone that you love, I don't really believe that she thinks that there's no one that he loves. I think she knows deep down that he does care for her. She just doesn't want to believe it because that would be difficult.
I agree with all of that. Technically speaking, of course, the movie was excellent. All of the visuals, all of the different landscapes that they put together, the new places that we got to see, especially where the dwarves lived. I don't remember what that's called. And by the way, I loved that. Is it Peter?
Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, I loved that he got to play this enormous character, but was still a dwarf.
It bothered me a little bit that he was lowering his voice, but then it became like, oh, well, that's kind of like more of the character, and it was bringing a little bit of the little underlying humor to it as well.
Yeah,
I loved that whole landscape and the star and just that whole world that we got to visit. So that was really nice. But of course, it's a grade A film, and all of that was done beautifully. And I, of course, loved going back to see Wakanda again.
The other character that we really didn't talk about was the angst and teenage rebellion of Groot. Just walking along like, no, I am gonna keep playing this. I'm gonna keep playing this video game, and it is so in line with kids today. I mean, I have to. If there's like, yeah, I mean, they just want to play video games, and he's just like so into this game, but when he's actually needed and he needs to step up, it's like, well, yeah, hey, yeah, they need to connect those two pieces. Yeah, I got this. And then afterwards, he's just going to go right back to his video game. But I thought that they did an excellent job, though, with that character and showing that, like, teenage rebellion and him just kind of growing up, and the fact that this is not the same Groot that we knew. This is a new Groot. This is a new character.
Yeah, Groot is a great character. I think both as a emotional character and as a technical achievement. I agree with everything you said about Thanos as a technical achievement as well as a character. I think he looked great. I think a lot of credit, in addition to the technicians and the computer artists that made him so great, Josh Brolin did a wonderful job playing the character. I think, sometimes, and I commented on this after we saw it, sometimes I wished it would have lingered longer on the specific story arc they were at before they switched to the other one, just because I was so invested in like this one particular part of the story, and I was like, oh, but I want to see how that ends, and we moved to somewhere else. But that's not a problem. That's just a directorial choice. The only technical issue that I would bring up is, personally, I thought the planet of Titan, as opposed to all the others, I thought the planet of Titan just looked a little bit more CGI-ish than the others. It looked less, It
looked a little bit more desolate.
Well, it looked more like computer graphics. It looked a little bit more like a cut scene of a video game, as opposed to something that was actually in existence. Now, I do have to say, I'm in general not a fan of 3D. We saw it in 3D, so it's possible that some of the kind of unrealness that I experienced was part of the 3D post-processing. And perhaps when we see it again in 2D, it will look more realistic to me. So I don't want to say, oh, that didn't look real. Maybe it does if you don't see it in 3D. But so I'm not sure. I'll have to see it in non-3D and see what I think. But I do think that Titan looked a little bit more video gamey. But otherwise, I really loved it. I thought the music was really good. You know, something I always try and keep an ear to the soundtrack, and I thought it was really appropriate. And moreover, the soundtracks I like the most are the ones that aren't like the most obvious. In other words, there's a big action scene and it's all big brass horns. There's a sad scene and it's all, you know, just really sustained strings or piano. And I thought some of the composer, I think Alan Silvestri did the music to this one, and I liked how it wasn't always the most obvious choice. That sometimes he'd have like a different instrumentation or a different arrangement than I would have expected. And I liked that. It gave the scene a different kind of tension and a different kind of flavor. And ultimately, the music is supposed to be, it's supposed to enhance the scene and not be so obvious that it pulls you out of the scene. And I thought it did that. I thought it gave the scenes maybe a more unique emotionality by being slightly unexpected. So I like that. Give the soundtrack producers their due. I think that's something I wanted to talk about.
I think there were some things that Thanos could have been using the Reality Stone a lot more. Like, he could have had her believe that she destroyed the gem and that Vision was dead and could just, like, walk over and pluck it out. And they chose to do it a little bit more dramatic way and have her actually destroy it.
Right.
So, I mean, he's really powerful. Like, extremely powerful, but not really tapping into all the power that he has.
I've read writers talking about that. You know, what do you do when you have omnipotent characters? You know, what do you do when all Superman needs to do is just walk around with his laser eyes, blasting absolutely everything all the time and ending every problem that way? You know, I mean, how do you keep it interesting? And so, to some degree, I think they didn't depower Thanos. I mean, he had all that power, but I do think that some of the choices not to use it were, like you said, they want to make it more tense. They want to make it more dramatic. And they know that if he used 100% of his power, it would, like, end everything. That's half the reason in these movies, you know. It's like the one character, either the protagonist or antagonist, whoever has the upper hand, doesn't just immediately kill whomever's in front of them, because that would end the film real quickly and we're done.
And the whole... at the end where he says, you know, you should have gone for my head. That was the only place that was going to make a difference.
Or chopped off his hand.
Chopped off his arm.
That would have been another
too.
good one. If he hacked off his arm.
Yes. Yeah, I thought about that in the movie.
Yeah.
I'm like, why did you get him in the chest? Why didn't you you have an axe. Why didn't you just take his arm off?
Yeah. Or when, you know, they had Thanos on Titan and they were all trying to grab the gauntlet off. It's like, why don't you just hack his arm off? I mean, you know, that's the way to do it. Figure out how to get his fingers out of the gauntlet at some other point. You know, just hack his arm off.
Oh, but you can just get him out by just lighting his arm on fire.
Yeah.
Just burn it out.
Right, do something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that a little gory?
No,
demented?
It's fine. This is an adult podcast. We're not listening. As long as we're not dropping F-bombs every word, we're okay.
A final note on the storyline for me that I really enjoyed, that they broke up, you know, since they were in all these different places, that the final battle took place in two different areas until, of course, Thanos was like, okay, that's it, here, I'm out. And then he goes to Wakanda to get the final stone. But I really enjoyed the fact that they broke the characters, they split them up, and that they had most of those final moments in the two different places. I thought that was really good writing.
Did you also appreciate the Star-Lord and Tony talking, and the Star-Lord saying, you know, they're 100% human, which is, you know, That's the bad part for decision making. You know.
Right. He said, I'm half human, so any part of me that's stupid is 100% you. But yeah, I mean, there's so many great one-liners in this movie. Just great writing, really well put together story. I agree with you that it was a little. Well, actually, this gets to my last question of overall, were you satisfied by the movie? I was personally satisfied with the movie, but I acknowledge those people who felt that they wanted it wrapped up. They didn't like the movie ending like on a cliffhanger in the middle of the story. They wanted more. I get that. I really do.
See, I didn't know it was a two-parter until we were walking to the theater and you said, this is 2 parts, right? And I was like, Oh, okay. But even knowing that if I had known, and I probably already knew that some of the other movies were coming out,
right.
When I was watching the movie, I was present to the movie, and I wasn't thinking about, oh, well, that character can't die because they're making another movie. I was just present to this is what's happening. This is what's happening right now.
And that's what they want. I mean, in Scalzi's review where he was talking about how he wasn't satisfied, and to him, he wasn't satisfied because he didn't think the deaths being unreal made the stakes lower. But I would completely disagree with that. I would say by having so many of the heroes die, it made the stakes much higher. Even if intellectually their films are coming out, in story, in world, if you're able to just, suspend your disbelief, put out the real world, it made it incredibly, incredibly high because you're thinking not just, oh my God, my favorite heroes are dead, but with so much less firepower, how can our heroes possibly prevail? And I think that's great writing, and I think that's a good ending.
Yeah, I agree. As much as I was devastated by the fact that I wasn't getting my ending, and intellectually deep inside I knew these characters were coming back, I was still devastated to see them go. And yes, because they're beloved characters or whatever, but also because of the point you made just now about, okay, if we're going to get out of this, we're missing half of everybody.
Sure.
And you go into the movie with, Pepper saying, you need to come back. You need to turn around right now. And Tony thinks this is a one-way trip for himself. And did Pepper really say that last thing when she's cut off that, yes, he needs to come back because she is pregnant? Because we didn't actually hear exactly, but kind of gave the impression that that might be the case. Is Pepper still there?
Right.
Or you're watching this one character disappear, and you're thinking, okay, well, if that character is disappearing, the one next to him or her can't disappear. And yet, the character does.
It was a shocking ending.
I did ultimately find it satisfying.
Which is hard to do these days because there is a formula. And they all use it because it's a working formula. And this movie did try and throw the formula on its head. And I'm sure ultimately when we play both movies back to back, it will be the traditional formula as one long arc. But for now, it seems to be defying, and it's good. It's good. It's nice it's nice that they didn't just rest on their laurels for their 10-year anniversary and just say, we're going to make a bullshit movie where everyone just comes together and tells wisecracks and goes home. But that they really told a story that had a lot of tension and
they hid just enough details. Like you were saying, you didn't quite catch the whole thing with Doctor Strange saying it's the only way. It was the only way. You also have the whole Gamora telling Peter, you have to kill me. You have to kill me because when he wants the Soul Stone, I'm the key. Well, you think, oh, well, she's the key because she knows where it is, when in fact that's not the reason that she's the key.
Right. She's
the key because without her and without that sacrifice, he cannot actually acquire the Soul Stone. So there's like a layer there. There's a couple different layers, which was really nice to see. And hey, we could be completely wrong about why Doctor Strange chose to save Tony. It's
it's
possible.
We're gonna find out in a year, I guess.
More than a year, right?
No, it's coming out in May 2019.
May? Okay.
Yeah. because they filmed them back to back. They filmed both movies back to back. So they're basically doing a year of extra post-production on the movie, getting the CGI and all of that kind of stuff. But all the principal photography, all that.
Yes, and in the next trailer, it will be Bruce Banner running forward with the rest of the cast. And then in the movie, he will be gone and it will only be the Hulk.
Yeah, they might as well. That's it for this panel. Caren, Golden, thank you so much for talking with me.
It was fun.
Thanks for having me.
And that's our panel discussion. I hope you enjoyed listening to it, and if you have any feedback or comments or questions, please email at info@culturepopremix.com and let me know what you're thinking. If you liked this episode, please leave a review in the Apple Podcasts app or iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. Be good to yourselves and each other, and I will catch you next time.
Culture Pop Remix.